All right, so today I'm going to be going over event listeners with JavaScript. I think that the event listeners are really cool. It's it just provides a way to create content for the web, like web applications that actually do things when the user expects them to do things. So it's one of the things that I like the most about web development is creating things that the user can actually interact with in a much more responsive way. I mean, a lot of the times when I think of responsive web design, I think of interactive content rather than just um, content that responds to the size of your screen. So I always like to think of it like that when we're creating web applications, we're looking for a way to create them so that they're interactive. So to start off, I'm just going to show you this. Um, with the event listeners, you can choose from a whole host of different events that happen. I'll link this in the description of this video, but there are, you know, a ton of different events that you can use and that you can begin to link together so that when multiple things happen, it creates a certain outcome. So I'm just going to focus on a couple of them today as kind of some brief examples of things that we can start to do as we use event listeners. So we're just going to leave this for now, but it's a good resource in case you're looking for what types of events you can actually use to manipulate the document. So now we'll go ahead and go over to VS Code. I created just this quick sample project, and it just has a couple different elements in it that we're going to use to manipulate our website. So we'll go ahead and go live and just take a look at it really quick, and then we'll dive into each one. So the first one is just a click me button. So we'll click on it, and it just pops up a warning: a button has been pressed when it's activated. So the next one, this one, every time the mouse goes over this section or this div, it changes the text color. So you can do some just interesting things with interactivity every time the mouse goes over something. This one, just an input box, so we'll just do test text. We'll hit enter, and it pops up an alert. You typed in test text. So this one, it's based on key presses, but it only works if you've put something in here and then you press enter, and then it'll pop that up. So you can hit enter all you want, but it won't work until you've done that. So you're kind of using some multiple things. So this next one, the next element, double click. When you double click the text, it changes the background of this div. Sometimes it doesn't like to. There we go. There we go. So yeah, that one just changes the background color every time you double click. This one I thought was really cool. This one I actually borrowed from um, Web3 schools. It was a really cool one that I just wanted to show. It's a draggable div. So it's something that the user can actually move on your website. And as just an example of how you could use this, you could have this be like a sorting option. So you could have multiple, and if they sort this into a div over here, then they could, these are all the ones they want to buy or all the ones that they've done. I don't know. There's a bunch of different applications that you could use it for, but the user could actually drag and drop the div elements, and then based on where they place it, you could have different things happen because um, there's a event listener, sorry, the word escaped me, that lets you check for when something has stopped being dragged around, or based on where they stopped dragging it, that will allow you to check those different parameters. So those are just some basic ones right here, but we'll go ahead and look at how it's actually done just because that's a little bit more important. But so we have our HTML here. We link to the two different scripts. So the drag element one, we'll go over that one last. That's the one that I borrowed from the W3 school. I didn't change anything about it. I just brought it in just because I thought it was a really cool example of what you can do with event listeners if you kind of link them together and use more than one. So we'll start off just by looking at the listeners.js that I made. So in here, the first thing I did, as we've learned in some of our other lessons and classes, is I created a variable that kind of called on each of these elements from the HTML. So we got those. I created just a list of some colors to use for the mouse over and the double click. So we'll go over this first one. So whenever you're using an event listener, you need to do the element that you're selecting. So if it's, for example, this one, the button, you need to select the button, then dot add event listener. And then the first argument that you put within this function call essentially is click. That's the type of event listener you want to use. And then because we're calling just an arrow function, that's what I did for all of these. We'll put our arrow function next, but you could do a function call, you could do an anonymous function. There's a bunch of different things you could do here. But from there, you can just begin your function based on the parameter. So for this one, all I did was start an alert, put that down. The next one, the one that was more interesting was the key press. So key presses are a little bit tricky just because there's so many keys that people can use. You can do key press, key up, key down. So it just kind of depends what you're looking to do. I just wanted to capture anytime a key is pressed on the keyboard. So we're going to call it with key press. That's going to be the first argument here. Next, we're going to be actually storing the event or the key press event and passing it into our arrow function. So the first thing I'm going to do is just check if the event.key. So this will allow you to check which key it is. And this, I know there's a list somewhere, but it took me a couple tries to just find the right variation of enter. Tried it lowercase enter, uppercase. There was only two, I guess, but it took me a minute to figure out how to actually have the computer check for enter. So you just have to identify the key that you're checking or the key that you want to make sure is actually the one that's pressed. So I did enter, and then I also checked if the input value does not equal nothing. So if they hit enter and they've entered anything into the input element, then it's going to run the rest of this function. And it's just a simple alert function as well that I pass in the value that they put into the input. So it was pretty quick and easy. But one thing to note here is the key press event listener. You're not adding it to a specific element like you would with the click or mouse over or double click. You're actually adding it straight to the document because you want to register if a key has been pressed essentially just while the document is open. So right now, if we're typing and I hit enter, it's not going to trigger this same alert because we're not in our document, we're not on our web page. So just another thing to kind of note is the event listener for key press, you can add straight to the document. You can actually add a lot of the different events to your document. You'll just have to be careful about where you actually call them from because you just have to make sure that you're calling it at the right place. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have for event listeners. I'd love to hear from you guys for ways that you're excited to use them or questions you have about how to use them. Like I said, this web page here is really helpful just to see what types of event listeners you can do, and it's a great resource because even if you just click on it, it will then open a page explaining how to use that event listener. It'll have examples, it'll show you different ways that it can be used and manipulated so that you can apply it for your applications. So Yeah, I think that's a great resource. Like I said, I'll leave it linked below, but thanks for watching.